Now I will introduce Dr. Rachel Turman in sociology to introduce our speaker. Rachel.
Hello all, welcome, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. I hope everyone's feeling better than me. I came down with a cold over the weekend, and I do not feel good today, but I'm really happy to be here. The wealth and poverty theme is a place where we try to develop students' sense of critical thinking about wealth and poverty issues and inequality, as young Kim pointed out. And our speaker today brings a perspective of how we might approach this style of thinking through photography. Roger May is an Appalachian American photographer and writer based in Charleston, West Virginia. He was born in the Tug River Valley, located on the West Virginia and Kentucky state line, in the heart of Hatfield and McCoy country. His photographs, essays, and interviews have been published in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Atlantic, Al Jazeera America, National Geographic, the Oxford American, Le Monde Diplomatique, Photo District News, and others. In February 2014, he started the crowdsourced Looking at Appalachia project. He blogs at walkyourcamera.org. Please join me in welcoming Roger May.
Is anyone else here nervous? Just me. Well, I brought balloons for everyone, but they got away, and you're welcome to try to get them. I'll photograph the whole thing. Thanks so much for having me here. Any chance that I get to share photographs from Appalachia and talk about Appalachian photography and that sort of thing is a real treat. This is my second official time in Athens, but my first time at Ohio University, so thanks again for having me here. I wanted to share this project, Looking at Appalachia, with you and just give you some of my personal thoughts on the war on poverty, about photography in Appalachia and that sort of thing. I'm not much of a lecturer. I know that disappoints everybody here, but I appreciate conversation, so I think they have some mics on either side here for questions. I'm okay with not waiting until the end if you have questions. If you want to slide out to the side and throw your hand up and ask a question, I'd prefer that you do that rather than forget your question. All right, so let's go. So at 9:30 this morning, I Googled the word Appalachia. Okay, and then I clicked on images. And then if you looked at the colored tabs directly below that, the first 4 entries: trailer park, rural poverty, child poverty, extreme poverty, mining town, and then go on over near the right, you see backwoods. So I'm always fascinated by these trigger words and these things that sort of call up imagery of a region or of a people or of a place and that sort of thing. And I like to think about how we arrived at sort of those, I guess, visual definitions of place. And for the purposes of this talk, I want to start that with the war on poverty that was launched in 1964 with President Lyndon Johnson sitting here in Inez, Kentucky, or in Martin County, Kentucky, at the Fletcher House. Certainly pictures were being made in Appalachia prior to 1964. The FSA photographers, Marion Post Wolcott, Ben Shahn, the list goes on. A lot of those photographers made work in Appalachia in the 30s and 40s. Even prior to that, Doris Ullman, lots of other people were making work in the region. And the region was depicted in other ways through caricature and paintings and cartoons and so on. But I'm interested in photography, and so that's where I'm gonna jump in here. So as part of President Johnson's launch of the War on Poverty, he did a poverty tour. And I really think that based on Appalachia's proximity to D.C., it made it a little easier to sort of navigate, to get to D.C., to West Virginia or Eastern Kentucky, Southern Ohio is just a hop, skip, and a jump. And then during that poverty tour, these are the types of images that were being circulated throughout the United States. And the next group of pictures that I'm going to show you are from Life magazine in 1964. And I have a copy of this magazine, and I was showing my girlfriend the other day that it blows my mind that those pictures, although I think well-intentioned at the time, they were made and circulated to show that there was a need. But I think those images sort of helped reinforce or develop this visual stereotype, this visual definition of a people and of a place. And I thought, well, if images can be used to construct stereotypes, surely they can be used to maybe help deconstruct stereotypes. Y'all are really quiet. So you see, newspapered walls here. You see a lot of children, not a lot of food. But I don't know if in their minds, I can't ask them, but if I could have, I would have maybe asked them if they felt poor or if they considered themselves poor. I moved to North Carolina as a teenager from West Virginia and had no idea that I was poor until somebody else told me I was by their standard. And that kind of stuck with me. And so how pictures can reinforce or deconstruct these ideas is just fascinating to me. So Appalachia, I get asked this question a lot, sometimes out of anger. Why isn't my county included in the map of Appalachia? And I don't really know the answer to that. But I can show you historically this. John C. Campbell developed a map in 1921. It's the orange boundary that you see there of what was thought to be Appalachia at the time. And then over time, you see how the region has been sort of redefined, ending with the most current or most recent boundary line of the yellow area there. In 1967, the Appalachian Regional Commission. Actually, I think 2008 might be the most current map. If you look at the ARC's, Appalachian Regional Commission's website, I think 2008 shows a list of, I believe it's 420 counties across 13 states. And this is the current map. So thinking about the war on poverty, thinking about the fact that 2014 was the sort of the 50th anniversary of that declaration of the war on poverty, I looked around to see if any other photographers were working on any projects that might sort of speak to that and the importance of that event. I didn't see anything, and I talked to a few folks and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this project. What are your thoughts? And received some pretty good feedback from some folks that I trust and admired. So in February of 2014, this was an Instagram post, February 19th, 2014. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this crowdsourced photography project where you don't have to live in Appalachia. You don't have to live in one of these 420 counties. You don't have to be a professional photographer. But if you're interested in submitting pictures that you've made while traveling in the region, or if you live in the region and you want to share pictures of where you live in the region, here's some guidelines to do that. And if you're interested, get in touch. Let's see where this thing goes. And within a week's time, I was inundated with emails, Facebook messages, phone calls, text messages, and things like that, where people were really excited about getting involved in the project, and it seemed that someone had been waiting for something like this to be a part of something. Yeah, I'll share that. This quote really stuck with me, talking about stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. So the goal of this project was not to sort of unwind or undo the War on Poverty photographs, but rather to serve as a visual counterpoint to that narrative that had been established. And again, if stereotypes could be constructed with photographs, I feel certain that over time they can be deconstructed or at least leveled out a bit. That's not to say that poverty doesn't exist. I think we all know that it does. That's not to say that poverty shouldn't be photographed. But I don't think poverty should be exploited. And I think it's my responsibility as a photographer, as a documentarian, as a human being, to tell the truth and to share true stories. I'm not a fan of anyone who says that as photographers or as documentarians or as media folks that we give anyone a voice. Everyone has a voice. And I think anybody that says the opposite of that is just not self-aware enough to know that people have a voice. I think my job and really the job of everyone that can is to amplify voices. And so that's what I really wanted to do with this project and what I try to do in my own photographic work. So I contacted a graphic artist friend of mine, and I thought, well, if we're going to have a project, we probably should have a logo, and we should probably have a website. So, in about 2 days' time, it looked official, and all I needed to do was figure out how the submissions were going to work, how the images were going to be voted on, or who got to decide what images were going to be included in the project and not. And so I just came up with 4 simple ground rules. The photographs that were submitted had to be your own. The work had to be made in the current calendar year. The work had to be made in a region defined by the ARC. Because of the scope of this project, I needed a quick and sure framework for it. So folks that were upset that the next county over wasn't included, I'm terribly sorry, but this is what we're going to work with for this project. And then 2, I wanted to make sure that all of the work came in by December 31st. And we're now in the 4th year of this project, and every year on December 31st, my inbox just blows up. I procrastinate, but come on, it's pretty funny to watch, 700 emails come in one night, and some are, large. There are large files attached. Not everybody uses Dropbox or Google Drive, so, just the whole night, Happy New Year. It's just rolling in. But that's great, and I really appreciate that. Anybody else? These are my favorite emails. I heard about your project. I'm not a photographer, but these are great. These are some of my favorite emails to read because there's there's no real pride other than pride in where folks are from and maybe a picture that they've made, and there's no pretension. And they just want to submit the work to see if anybody else likes it. And often they're pretty remarkable images. So I'm going to show you work from 2014, 2015, and 2016. We haven't published any work from 2017 yet. In fact, we're just now getting around to publishing the 2016 work. This is a passion project. It always has been. So I try to fit it in whenever I'm not doing other things. So if you've submitted work and it's not published yet, I'm sorry, but we'll get to it. Is there a way to bring the lights down any, or are they already down as far as we can go? I'm hoping you all can see these okay. Is anybody familiar with the work of Shelby Lee Adams? Yeah, I called him and convinced him to submit work here. He's pretty controversial, I think, but love him or hate him, I think his work deserves to be here. So I was glad to convince him to submit work. Another thing, too, that I've noticed as I've sort of shepherded this project and talked about it is my own understanding of Appalachia. And I tend to think of it very much as Central Appalachia or Coalfield Appalachia. And if you would have ever shown me an image from this part of New York, it would not have resonated with me as being in Appalachia. So it's always fun to see different parts of the region. I used to watch wrestling with my granddad when I was a kid, and he called it grunt and groan. I think of that every time I see this picture. I've looked at this picture 1,000 times, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but the kid on the left has a cane. Like, I don't know if he's just styling with the cane or if it's just like, either way, I mean, he's pulling it off, so. This is one of the photographs that was attached to an email that started out with, "I'm not a photographer, but," and I thought, I want to see more of those pictures if you're not a photographer. So at the end of 2014, when I launched this project, I didn't really think about the long term. I just thought about the immediacy of getting the guidelines together, getting the website created, and trying to get curated content out. And so rather than having me, as a white guy, curate a project from a diverse region, from diverse photographers, I reached out to some folks that I was close with from a lot of different backgrounds: documentarians, fine artists, photojournalists, men and women, black and white, to help me develop an editorial team so that as submissions came in, it wasn't just me giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and there could be some sort of democratic process with that. And then at the end of the year, they were like, "Okay, are we going to do this again?" And we did, and then we did it another year, and now it continues to grow. The image library online continues to grow. I'll use this as a shameless plug. If you want to submit images from 2017, please do. Yes, ma'am.
How many are on the team?
7. Yeah, 7. I think 8, including me. I'm a voting member. Yeah, so. And so we continued to 2015. That expression is the best. We were in Morgantown a few days ago, and we were sharing some of this work, and it was overheard that somebody was kind of complaining that Mississippi was included in Appalachia, and just it was bizarre to me. Like, why not Mississippi? You know. Also, I get emails and phone calls sometimes as if I can control the boundary of the Appalachian Regional Commission. I mean, yeah, I'll forward your email on to those folks. This is an image from George Etheridge. When he submitted work in 2014, he was getting ready to intern for the New York Times, and he was 21 years old, 22 years old. And right around that time that he emailed me to tell me that he had got an internship, that's another great thing about this project, is that it's created some really great relationships with other photographers and non-photographers alike. But and then I got an email from this 77, 76-year-old retired coal miner, and it just dawned on me the range of experience and life experience and walks of life that we have by doing a project that quickly became bigger than any one person or any few dozen people. Just by luck, I got invited to go to this river baptism of my great aunt, who was, I think, 82 or 83, and it was a remarkable experience. So if there are any photo students in here and your photo instructor tells you to always keep a camera on you, listen. And then 2016. So we circled back around to Instagram since the project was launched on Instagram. We created, social media channels for the project, and we thought it would be kind of cool to have photographers contact us who want to show their Appalachia from their corner of Appalachia. So we do Instagram dispatches. And I think this might have been last year, about a year ago. Nathan Arms, who lives in Colorado, but his grandparents grew up in Western North Carolina, and he would go there to visit. I think they're both gone now, but I think he still has family in the area. And so he did about a week-long dispatch from Western North Carolina. And we found that it's just a different platform to engage an audience, and not necessarily a specific age of folks, but it's a different platform and we want to be able to try to reach people with the project on a number of different levels. I just picked this one because I like beans and cornbread, but. Micah Cash did this, made this picture. This was from a takeover that he did when he was working on a project called Dangerous Waters about the TVA, and his book is available now. I just got a copy of it in the mail the other day. It's a beautiful book, and Mike is a great guy. So at the end of 2014, I had an idea to mount an exhibit of this work. And in the first year, we had roughly 3,000 images that were submitted for consideration. About 10% of those were voted into the project. And so of those 300 images, we selected 73, I think, to print, to be a part of a traveling exhibit. And I'm a firm believer in seeing work in person. It's great that we can access this work on our phones and our tablets and our laptops, but then to actually get out of your house and go look at art on the wall can also be a very powerful experience. So we found a wonderful printer in Stanton, Virginia, who loved the project, loved the idea of it, and was more than generous with his time and resources to print, mount, and frame the exhibit for us at just an incredibly low price. And it was low enough that I contacted each of the 54 photographers we had selected their work to be in the exhibit, and told them that, and then they all just were quick to submit the payment to have their work printed, mounted, and framed. And at the time, I didn't realize how unwieldy and how big an exhibit of 73 images was. Now I know that's actually why I'm gray. And we're likely going to do it again. At least I think we're going to do it again. But it'll be a smaller exhibit probably, and then we're going to combine some of the calendar years. So maybe 2015 and 2016 will be combined into an exhibit. And there'll be information about that online if that's the direction we decide to go in. The first exhibit was at the Spartanburg County Public Library in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I've felt from the get-go with this work that I wanted it to be seen by as many people as possible. And when we decided to do a print exhibit, the goal was to have it in as many public spaces as possible. So to have it kick off at a library was pretty great. And these are some installation shots from various exhibits. We've been fortunate enough to have some great coverage of this project, and that certainly has helped spread the word. But outside of our website and our social media activity, I don't really know how people hear about it. I always ask, "How'd you hear about the project?" In early 2016, maybe late 2015, a friend of mine, Lisa McCarty, who is the curator of the special collections at the Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Duke University, said, "What are you going to do with like the ephemera and the prints and all those sorts of things with the project? If you haven't thought about it, we would love for you to consider allowing Duke to be the repository for the project." So I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time. I was doing some teaching in the continuing ed program at the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke, and it seemed like a natural fit. And then I thought, well, it would have been great to have an institution in Appalachia be the repository for that. And then after some thought, I think it's good also that there's an institution outside the region that was interested in it, so that we can, bridge that divide. I mentioned earlier that we try to push the project out via social media. So another shameless plug, follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. And with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. One at a time, please.
There are microphones on both sides of the...
No pressure. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you accept pieces that have already been exhibited in other shows, because there are a lot of really wonderful art shows that happen in Nelsonville that are centered around exactly this. And if you could maybe get some of those artists to submit, then you might have a really good body of work for it.
Sure, absolutely. With that, it would just need to be made in the current calendar year. So we won't accept work from last year or the year prior or anything like that. So if an artist is making work this year or in whatever current calendar year, that'd be great.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sam Miller. Thank you so much for creating this project and also coming here. While I was looking through your website, I noticed that there aren't any images that capture the heroin epidemic, which is riddling this area. And I was wondering if that is a strategic move on behalf of your organization, where you kind of view that as poverty porn, or if there just haven't been any images that have been submitted that document that.
Sure. We've received quite a few submissions that would fall in the purview of poverty tours, like, oh, this is an Appalachian photo project. I'll just drive around and won't even get out of my car and roll the window down and photograph a trailer park or a drug dealer or whatever the case may be. So we've had no shortage of those types of submissions, but we've also felt that it's very important to not shy away from those images. It's a very real epidemic. I don't know that it was strategic maybe in the sense that we're committed to not shying away from that issue or issues that might be hard to look at. I think that one of the images in particular by Mark Trent, he lives in Lewisburg, West Virginia. He's a great young photographer and filmmaker, and he had been working for a couple of years on both a still and a motion project about some friends of his that were struggling with that. So I think we ask that people spend some time with the project, kind of get a feel for what it is that the project is about. And if people still submit 40 pictures of just abject poverty, and then I think they're probably a little bit off the mark with what it is that we want to show. Not that that's not true, and we certainly want to show it, but that's not all we want to show, and it's certainly not all we want to see. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I also have one more question.
Sure.
In the future years, is there any way to include captions on your images? Because I feel like there are stories behind them, many of them, and I would love to know those, and I'm wondering if that's something that you have thought of.
I wish I could Facebook Live that on our page right now, because I do. I want to read more. I want to have more context about the images. Some images are just beautiful, aesthetically. Some people they submit more of an extended caption. We include as much information as they give us when they submit the work, and then we publish all of that online. So I'm a fan of more text as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi,
Hey.
Keith Wasserman, Good Works. Can you hear me okay? I don't know if this is on, but
I can hear you, Keith.
Okay.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask if you would speak to the subject of ethics a little bit. I'd be interested in hearing your perspective as someone who leads a nonprofit who constantly gets requests for people wanting to photograph the people that I serve and work with and are learning to love. And I kind of serve as a gatekeeper. I'm interested to know what ethics you would prescribe. And I realize in looking at these photographs, chances are you were not necessarily scrutinizing the ethics that people used when they took those photographs, my guess. So that wasn't part of your evaluation, I'm assuming. But I would be interested just to hear from you about what ethics you might prescribe to a photographer who wants to take pictures of people.
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. Did everybody hear that? It's near and dear to my heart. In fact, so much so that you may roll your eyes at this, but I don't say, can I take your picture? I say, can I make your picture? Because in the part of Appalachia that I'm from, so much has already been taken from the land and from the people. I even get choked up thinking about it. So I don't want to be a part of any kind of taking. I don't want to be another taker in a long line of takers. So I take that incredibly seriously. Hi, my name is Roger. I'm a photographer. Could I make a picture of you? Would you mind if I made a picture of your barn, your truck, your whatever the case may be? What's it for? Well, I do this project called Looking at Appalachia, and I may or may not be interested in submitting it to the team to look at. Here's my card with all my information on it. I'd be happy to email you a copy. I actually carry around a Polaroid camera so I can make a picture in the field and give that to them. I can email it, find me on Facebook. You can verify that I am who I say I am. My thing is I have to be able to look you in the eye at the end of the day and know that I represented you fairly and honestly, and that you're okay with that representation, even if it might make you uncomfortable, even if it might make you embarrassed. And if the latter is the case, then I may sit with that for a while and really, circle back with you in a day or two and see where you are with it. But I'm interested in maintaining long-term relationships with people. I'm not a parachute photographer. Most of the work that I do is long form. And I spend a lot of time doing it, so I'm not really going anywhere. And if you change your mind 6 months from now, I'll take the image down. When we have people submit work, I'm sure that as a team, and we're all doing this remotely. We don't get together and physically meet. We're all looking at these images in a Dropbox folder, sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes in probably sitting in traffic at a red light, as we're going through the images. But the reason that I selected the people, that I asked the people, and that they serve voluntarily on this editorial team is that I trust them. I trust their judgment. I trust their character, and so that's sort of how we've approached that. There's this. I'm no attorney, and I can't give you legal advice, at least not sober, and so I think that there's this argument that, well, if you're in a public space, you're fair game. I can make all the pictures that I want of you. And I absolutely detest that. And that's me personally. I will never make a picture of someone that I don't at least first ask. And then if I do, which I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I've done that without their knowing, I go to them and say, hey, I just made this picture. And I'll show them if I'm shooting digitally or with my iPhone or whatever the case may be. Or if it's film, I'll just say, hey, I made a picture, and I'd be happy to send you a copy of it once I have the film processed. Does that?
Yeah, do you use any written interchange at all, or is it all word of mouth?
It's to this point, it's been all word of mouth. Yeah, we don't have any waivers or anything that we ask anyone to sign. I trust the photographers that are submitting the work until I have a reason not to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Hey, my name's Emily Harger. I'm a documentary filmmaker and an alumni of OU's Phys Comm program. I'm also from the Monongahela Valley, which is just north of the West Virginia border. And I guess I want to ask, like coming from the Pittsburgh area, I see a lot of misrepresentation of my hometown, which is very blighted and going through economic problems, but like there's also a diversity of wealth and a diversity of race there. So I'm wondering, like, what material have you not had submitted to looking at Appalachia that you wish to see in regards to race and class that you're not seeing specifically from Pennsylvania, but also just from all of the states?
Sure. Well, I think we aren't seeing enough photographs of or by people of color. LGBT folks are woefully underrepresented, and I think not only photographically but as photographers. I joked one time with somebody and was like, "Where's the project? You know, Appalachian opulence. Like, who's going around Appalachia like photographing mansions and millionaires and this and you know like." I would like to see those pictures. I mean, frankly, I know they're maybe few and far between, but maybe not. But you know, I think if there are any GIS developers or interns or anybody that wants to help out with the project, I would love somehow to have, you know, the ARC map, and then have each county that we've already photographed or have in the collection kind of shaded, and to see where the gaps are in terms of just geography. But then in terms of subject matter, sometimes I feel like it's a little too light and fluffy. You know, like it's a little too in the opposite direction of the War on Poverty images. And I don't want to, just because I'm fiercely protective and also been accused of being a gatekeeper for a number of things, but I would like to see more real sort of, you know, I love a pretty landscape and a sunrise, but I mean, if I had a nickel for every one that we get every single year, it's like, I just want to put them all in one folder, you know, and we have 712 sunrise photos this year or something like that. But I think it's really up to the people who are familiar with the project. I would challenge you and others, myself included, to look for the voids and look for the gaps in the project and maybe sort of go out and try to find what might fit that or fill that.
So to piggyback off that, do you guys have any efforts to show more video or film representation of Appalachia on looking at Appalachia?
Video or? Just
like video representation outside of just photo.
Yeah, so I jumped the gun a little bit last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and thought that it would be great to have audio and video and writing also be a part of the project as sort of independent. Each vein, if you will, would have its own sort of editorial team. So I reached out to folks, again, that I trusted, knew their work, was familiar enough with how they operated in the world, and asked them to sort of be like editorial overseers of each of those components. And then it just sort of ground to a halt. There was a lot going on with me and a lot going on with them, and so it never really went anywhere. But I would love to see the project expand into sort of documentary shorts, some, you know, collected audio and you know, maybe a podcast or something like that. But then also the narrative, you know, short stories and essays and things like that. Hi.
Congratulations, great idea, great job. Since you started pointing out Google and how, you know, people get what they get when they look into this most searched engine, I was wondering if you've ever thought about utilizing the load of images you have to intentionally work through the search engine algorithm to better position these perspectives, aside from the great work you're already doing in the social networks?
That's way smarter than anything I would have thought to do. But no, I'm going to write that down. That's a great idea. No, that's I had not thought of that. But yeah, I'll credit you for that if I get you. Hi.
I'm Christy Zumter. I've seen this project specifically kind of connected to Elizabeth Barrett's film, Stranger with a Camera, and I'm wondering if that project, which really kind of explored the frustration of being misrepresented, not having agency in your own representation, if that project or any other similar projects had an influence on your creation of the project.
I think certainly Liz Barrett's film did. Every time I've seen that, I get frustrated with myself because I kind of change sides. And I think if you watch it more than once, you might find that you kind of go back and forth maybe, between the filmmaker and just trying to help and seemingly not doing anything wrong, not knowing about the sort of the cultural norm or the cultural sensitivities of where he was. And then Hobart Ison being the property owner. If you all haven't seen this film, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Certainly that, like The True Meaning of Pictures, Shelby Lee Adams. I don't know if you've seen that. I think that's a really well done film. I interviewed him for my blog several years ago, and he's, I think, cantankerous is the word I'm going to use. We exchanged several emails. I called him and said, "Hey Shelby, would you mind if I recorded this conversation, because I realize that you've been misquoted before and I want to make sure that I get everything accurate." And then there was about a 10-second pause, and he said, "Well, maybe I should record it too." I was like, "All right, we'll have 2 copies of it then. Sure, that's fine." And then the only, I guess, demand, if you will, that he had in that phone conversation was, "I don't want to talk about the documentary. Don't ask me anything about it." Okay. So I didn't, but I own it, and I've watched it probably more times than I care to admit. And I think it certainly influenced how I thought about making work in the area, and at the time not living in the area, being from the area but not living in the area now. And now I'm back in West Virginia. But those 2 documentaries probably come to mind the most. Yeah.
Can you repeat the names of those documentaries?
Sure. One is called Stranger with a Camera, and it was made by Elizabeth Barrett, I believe, in 1989. 1999, maybe, I don't know. And then the other one is called The True Meaning of Pictures, and it's about the work of Shelby Lee Adams. And then there's Harlan County, USA, which is a great film, Barbara Koppel. And I'm sure there are others that are just escaping me at the moment. Are there any other? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And I ask that because I'm a statistician who struggle with that now in terms of how we're visualizing data, especially healthcare data.
Mm-hmm.
The Johnson Foundation is focused both on showing abject poverty, but also visualizing what they call bright spots in Appalachia. So do you guys have to have discussions about what's going on?
I think Dropbox added this great feature maybe a year or so ago where you could actually comment on images. And sometimes there'll be a little bit of a running conversation going on there. Yes, I really like this image, but so-and-so. I don't think we've had a lot of, at the outset, we had some long discussions about kind of what we were looking for and what we weren't, and how to avoid some of the pitfalls of, when the election cycle was happening and all of a sudden Appalachia became Trump country. And then not only was it Trump country, but it was West Virginia, and then it was McDowell County, and then it was Welch, and then it was Ed Shepard at his 76th station, and everybody and their mom was there talking to Ed Shepard, and he somehow, I mean, I'm fine with, come to West Virginia, but talk to somebody other than Ed and go to somewhere other than McDowell County. I don't, outside of that, no, we haven't had any conversations or sort of groupthink talks about where we are on the spectrum of that. What I tend to do is when we've made the final selections for the year, I sort of batch process them in Photoshop and create a contact sheet. And then I sort of just look at that. I just kind of run through it a few times and see if, does everybody look like me? Or is there some diversity? Is there some like regional diversity between, maybe urban and rural? Do we have 14 sunrise pictures, or do we have 14 heroin epidemic pictures, those sorts of things. I'm sure that there are many gaps and many issues with what we're doing, and would be the first to say that I would agree with that. But I hope that this is at least a starting point to have a conversation, to be thinking about those sorts of things, and to over time start to unravel some of those visual, stereotypes and visual triggers that we have when we think of Appalachia. I did a talk a few years ago at Virginia Tech, and it was maybe a 9 a.m. class, and the kids in the class, they were just struggling to be there, and so I started with a whiteboard, and I said, okay, what's the first thing that you think of when you think of Appalachia? Dead silence, nothing. I'm like, come on, y'all, it's fine. You can say whatever you're thinking. Mountain Dew. And I'm like, who said that? Who said Mountain Dew? Okay, Mountain Dew. So we write Mountain Dew on the board. Pickup trucks. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Trailers. All right. Incest. Okay, incest. Let's put that on. I said anything goes, right? Anything goes. And so we go through maybe 2 or 3 columns of, what comes to mind when you think of Appalachia. And then I say, okay, well, let's work backwards here a little bit. Do people in Texas maybe drink Mountain Dew? Yeah, sure. So we erase that. Do people in Washington State drive pickup trucks? Yeah, my brother lives there. He's a logger, so-and-so. So we erase that. And then we work our way back to where we started with a blank whiteboard. And then my question to them is, well, how do you know that? When I say Appalachia, what is it that comes to your mind that makes you think Mountain Dew, pickup truck, rebel flag, whatever the case may be? How did you, because, they're young enough that they don't know and remember some of the things that I do from growing up in the region. So how is their visual definition or their general definition of Appalachia being formulated? Is it through social media? Is it through movies? Is it through memes or whatever the case may be? And I'm fascinated by that. But I think they got a lot out of that little exercise. Yes?
Seems like for potentially a variety of reasons, there's a declining trust in the media, and at least some of that is perceived that people in Appalachia don't trust the media, or maybe photographers, and that might be in part due to what you said about people being taken from. They've always been the face of poverty, and maybe people will have a reason not to trust photographers. But what has been your experience with people, and do you see that as a reality or just sort of a looming myth right now?
Well, I don't think it's a myth at all. I think there has, for a long time, been a mistrust of media, and rightly so, in a lot of regards. People that show up to an area, and it's not just Appalachia. I'm just talking about Appalachia because that's what's near and dear to me. If you go to the African continent, I mean, you can spend a lifetime talking about and researching the way that the media, the way that colonization, the way that any number of things have broken and shaped and caused all sorts of mistrust of the media or of people from the outside. I can tell you that I don't ever recall being told no if I ask someone. I think for me, it's about relationships. And the way I work in the field is I keep my camera out all the time. I may have a camera bag over my shoulder, but I have a camera that's out, so it's already visible. It's already a part of the conversation, whether I'm making a picture or not, so that when I do say, hey, would you mind if I make a picture while we're talking? They already, there's not this awkward moment of me reaching into the bag, introducing this third party to the conversation now, and then doing that. I think that, people they're tired of being misrepresented. They want to be heard, but they want to be heard accurately, and they're tired of dealing with people who show up with the story already written, and they need a soundbite or a visual to go with the story that they wrote on the plane on the way down or on the car ride down. And so I get mistrust, and I get why folks, rightly or wrongly, may feel the way that they feel about the media. I mean, I think our current administration is declaring his own sort of war on media, and that's another topic maybe for another place. But I also think in times like that good journalism rises to the top, and the people that are out there that are ethically doing what they're supposed to be doing, who are concerned about not just the story but the communities that they're reporting on, are going to come away with honorable work. Anybody asleep yet? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Not necessarily Donald Trump, like a candidate. Why would that region vote like West Virginia, for instance, red state? Why would that be reduce welfare if it is a very popular area?
Well, I've got my own opinions on that. I don't know that I'm qualified to speak for the entire region, but I think particularly in West Virginia, coal has been king there for a long time, and it's provided a lot of jobs. It's put a lot of food on tables and sent a lot of kids to college and paid a lot of mortgage payments and so on. And coal has had a sort of an overwhelming presence in politics, in communities, in people's livelihoods. And I think any time that sort of control and that sort of presence can shape opinion, and put fear in people that, if you elect a liberal candidate, they're going to take your job away. They're going to shut down the coal mines. They're going to put up solar farms all over the place and wind turbines on the mountaintops, and you're going to be out of a job. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think people were afraid. People were afraid that they were going to lose their jobs, and when you have your employers, oftentimes your only employer, telling you that you'd better be out at a rally or you'd better vote for the candidate who's going to make sure that you have a job, that's probably what you tend to do.
We are about out of time, so I want to thank Roger